Welcome to your weekly astrological forecast for the week of Monday, November 15th through Sunday, November 21st. And this week we do officially kick off eclipse season with our first eclipse of this season, and that will happen on Friday this week or very late Thursday, depending on where you are. And I just realized that I really should kind of just explain what eclipse season, what is that, what does that mean, because a lot of you might not know, or even if you do know, it's always good to have a refresher. And so basically this does happen twice a year, and it's basically whenever the sun is close to either the north or south node, the lunar north or south node specifically, which is the one most common used in astrology. Here you can see the north node is at 1 degree of Gemini. And so whenever the sun is close to either of the nodes, when the sun and the moon line up on those configurations, on those nodes, either as a new moon or a full moon, that's where you'll get an eclipse. And the reason for that is technical, and I could explain that in another video if you'd like. But generally what it means is an eclipse. So again, this does happen twice a year. We'll have, one or two new and or full moons that will classify as eclipses. And I think a lot of people don't know that because oftentimes these eclipses will be partial eclipses, not total eclipses. And they might be only visible on some other part of the world, maybe over the Pacific Ocean, for instance. And so, these things happen and we're not always very aware of them. But they do have very significant effects. Basically, if I really want to kind of simplify it here, an eclipse is like a super full moon or a super new moon. It just intensifies the lunar cycle, basically. And so even the quarter moons, like for instance, the first quarter moon that we experienced in Aquarius last week, even the quarter moons and the rest of the lunar cycle as well is intensified. And so these are things to look out for, that there may be generally more activity, things may be more dramatic, or there may be more accents, but also more lively parties, just generally more energy. It's almost a climax of some sorts. There's more energy in the air. It's more electric. And with these eclipses, that would be the first major theme, I would say, is just generally more activity and sometimes kind of trippy things happening. There's almost like a trippy or mystical quality to it. Events that might happen that might be synchronistic, or they might seem very unusual or unlikely, these events that might occur at these times. But these are events which are very important and end up changing our lives. And this is especially true if you have planets close to the nodes or close to these eclipses. So if you have any major planets or any planets at all, the nodes are pretty much on the cusp almost of Taurus, Gemini, and Scorpio, Sagittarius. So if you have any planets at all at the end of Taurus or at the end of Scorpio or at the beginning of Gemini or at the beginning of Sagittarius, these placements will be electrified and transformed in a very radical and karmic way. And that's why this really is an important time, because, for everyone in general, this is kind of just a time where there's more activity, more unusual events occurring. And for people specifically with planets that line up in these areas, Taurus, Gemini, Scorpio, Sagittarius, these could be life-changing for you and personally impacting. And I would also just mention really quickly before we get on with the weekly forecast that if you are ages 9, I'm sure there's probably not a lot of 9-year-olds watching this video, but 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, and so on, multiples of 9, you will be experiencing either your nodal return or your nodal opposition at this time. And so your life in general will be very personally impacted by this as well. Even if you have no other placements close to the nodes, we all experience major turning points at those ages where we either realize we've gotten off of track, off of what we came here to do and our true purpose and our karmic mission. Events may transpire which get us back on track at those ages, 9, 18, 27, 36, etc. And this can be sometimes uncomfortable and very dramatic. It can be very sudden, and it can be uncomfortable realizing that we've gone off track, but it's necessary to get back to our sort of purpose here and to make the most of our time here. So anyway, without further ado, let's talk about the week in more detail here. So So yeah, we are definitely in the midst of eclipse season, but we're having our first one actually happening this week. So Monday, November 15th, the moon does transit through Aries. You can see it here going over Chiron about midday. And this gives the day a fiery and active mood or vibe. Venus at 8 degrees of Capricorn over here, all earlier in the day than what you're seeing here. But Venus at 8 degrees of Capricorn does also square Chiron at 8 degrees of Aries. You can see that if I go a few hours back. So this may bring a sort of small crisis or a short-term crisis to our personal relationships. This may sort of ask us to change or evolve in regard to our personal relationships and how we empathize with others. And this aspect may also trigger kind of some personal outbursts or awkward interactions. Chiron is a very awkward planet, and so when we experience transits or aspects with Chiron, we are more empathetic, we're more considerate of others, but I think it's almost maybe for that very reason that things generally become awkward, or at least that's what I've observed. There's a lot of socially awkward interactions and kind of almost clashes because we are more focused on others, but sometimes that can be more dysfunctional, I think, if everyone's constantly focusing on everyone else. So that's kind of something to expect on Monday. And what else here? So the sun at 23 degrees of Scorpio also squares Jupiter at 23 degrees of Aquarius. And this indicates potential changes to our perspectives and our worldviews. And there may especially be new or groundbreaking information circulating, especially online or regarding secrets or taboo/occult information. Both Aquarius and Scorpio are very fixated on occult information and taboo, or mysteries or information that has been like swept under the rug or hidden for whatever reason. And so there very much may be sort of crises or sudden changes involving information circulating online, which has the potential to change worldviews of perhaps maybe a large population or large demographic, because these are holistic energies. Whenever you have Aquarius, it's very holistic, so it affects everyone in a very kind of revolutionary way. Okay, and then Tuesday, November 16th, moon does enter Taurus kind of later in the day if you go forward here. And this would typically make us very emotionally grounded, having the moon in Taurus, where it's exalted, so we're feeling emotionally stable and kind of calm. But remember, we do have this full moon lunar eclipse happening later in the week in this same sign of Taurus. And so although those themes of feeling emotionally grounded are still there, the energy is very intense at this time. The moon has entered the sign that it will have this eclipse in, and so it's almost like a very high vibe. It's very intense. It's like there's this electricity in the air, especially starting on Tuesday. And what else? Yeah, this just generally brings intensity, and it's because we're feeling the build up to this week's full moon lunar eclipse. Also, Sun does sextile Pluto at 24 degrees of Scorpio and Capricorn respectively, and this provides an opportunity for focusing on our goals and long-term desires. There has been a lot of focus in these two signs, and both Scorpio and Capricorn are very much fixated on long-term goals, but also on evolution and soul growth, and so that's kind of what the focus is on. Pluto reinforces this as well, because Pluto is focused on sometimes destruction, but it's destruction of whatever is old or unnecessary, or whatever's not working anymore. That must be destroyed so we can become new again, like the phoenix does. So and this is a sextile, so it is a pretty complementary or pretty harmonious aspect. So I do kind of like this going as we go into this kind of eclipse energy. We do have that kind of nice aspect between the sun and Pluto that are, these are like difficult or intense energies, but the sextile is kind of a beautiful, nice way to do it. So it's almost like a warm welcome into something that is potentially extremely transformative. So like, it is intense and it might be challenging, but this is kind of a nice, relatively comfortable way to introduce us to these themes that will happen a few days later, if that makes sense. Okay, next on Wednesday, November 17th, Mars makes its exact opposition with Uranus. So Mars at 12 degrees Scorpio here, making an opposition to Uranus at 12 degrees Taurus. And you can see here in this chart, about in the morning, or excuse me, evening of Wednesday, that the moon crosses over Uranus at the same time that Mars is opposing it. So it just really brings the focus there. So this may trigger volatile and unpredictable or even violent events. Oppositions in particular, especially between Mars and outer planets, very much can signify violent outbursts or violent accidents. This can also be related to finances or resources, also possessions or long-term commitments, since these are the themes that the Scorpio-Taurus axis explore, basically. It explores those themes. There's also potential for new realizations or sudden changes. That's pretty, these are sort of keywords when it comes to Uranus, that there's sudden shifts in evolution or consciousness that, again, can be uncomfortable because change is uncomfortable, especially in these fixed signs where we want things to be dependable. And we want to be, this is like our commitments and our finances again, but there may be sudden changes there, maybe in a potentially violent way. So I would just proceed with caution here. I don't think it's anything to worry about necessarily, but this really would not be a good day to be extra reckless or bold. I think it would be wise to proceed with caution on this day. There may also be power struggles with, Mars in domicile and Scorpio. It's a very competitive sort of testosterone or dopamine ruled energy. So yeah, there could be, and again, we're also leading up to the eclipse here. So, it's almost a really intense type of day. It's almost like, I think on this day, on Wednesday, we would almost feel like we're in the middle of like an epic drama or like, some kind of like movie or something, because there's almost just too much stuff happening. And there's pros and cons to this. It'll definitely be interesting. You won't be bored. There'll be a lot happening, and it can almost be addicting, things being so intense and theatrical, and this is a great time to make really large leaps in awareness, or just maybe toward goals that you're working on. You might have sudden strokes of luck, or making a lot of progress in a very short amount of time in your life. That's can happen now, but the same can happen the other way as well. There could be accidents or just almost more stuff happening just in general. So yeah, I would say just kind of sit back, enjoy the show, and really, this is almost like the test time. So it's almost like you've been studying ideally with the energies leading up to this. Now it's the time for the test. So we're not studying anymore. It's not necessarily hard. I've said it's hard. Okay, like a test can be hard, but it's time to just be yourself and just show where you're at, basically. You don't have to put in the work to like study now. This is just time to just be yourself. So you don't really have to necessarily try very hard, other than just doing whatever you would naturally do, if that makes sense. Hopefully I'm explaining that well enough. But it's almost like it is very theatrical, and we will all be a part of that, but you don't have to go out of your way to make things happen now, because there's just so much energy, so much potential for things to happen, that it's almost like, as challenging as that can be to adjust to these changes, it's also very easy in the sense that it takes less energy to like move mountains. So yeah, anyway. Okay, so yeah, that's what I say for Wednesday. So next, let's go to Thursday, November 18th. And before I talk about Thursday, I just want to mention that for the purposes of this video, I'm going to talk about the full moon lunar eclipse on Friday, since that's where it happens on Friday in my location, but it will happen either very early on Friday or very late on Thursday. And so, it really applies a lot to Thursday as well. But again, for this video, I'm going to put it into Friday. But on other issues or other topics, Thursday, November 18th, Mercury at 20 degrees. Let's go back several hours. Mercury at 20 degrees of Scorpio trines Neptune at 20 degrees of Pisces. And this indicates increased intuition and creativity. I really like this right in the midst, right just before this eclipse, because, like I said, this is a really karmic time where a lot is happening, and so it's really an excellent time to have your creativity and your intuition boosted, just in time for this full moon eclipse. I think that's a really excellent aspect just for making the most of things and being aware of these really sudden changes. Mercury in Scorpio is very capable of this type of energy because Scorpio is very instinctive and it's very much geared towards sudden change and evolution and growth. And so Mercury does pretty well in Scorpio. I don't think a lot of people realize that. So we are thinking very quickly. We're able to adapt to changes more so than we perhaps typically would be. And Mercury making this trine to Neptune. Neptune's in domicile in Pisces, and it's very dreamy and can be very confusing. But in this really positive trine aspect with Mercury and Scorpio, I don't see this as being necessarily confusing so much as I see it as being just indicating that we're extra aware, we're extra able to travel into the depths of our subconscious to become aware of these changes, to become intuitive and to adapt ultimately and evolve, because that's what the eclipses always ask of us. So yeah, I think this is a really excellent aspect to have just on the eve of an eclipse. It's really beautiful. Okay, so yeah, I kind of already touched on all this, but we may be extra perceptive or have revealing dreams or visions at this time, and our imaginations will be more active and vivid than usual. Okay, and then let's go forward to the big day, which would be Friday, November 19th, and this is where we finally have this full moon lunar eclipse. Again, it's very early, so let's go back to see the actual chart here, just in case you're watching. Oh, I went past it. Yeah, very early. So I believe this is Eastern Standard Time. So it's 3, 4 in the morning here. Sun at 27 degrees of Scorpio, opposing the moon at 27 degrees of Taurus. And this is sort of an out of sign eclipse because the nodes are actually in Gemini and Sagittarius. It's right on the cusp because the nodes are actually about to leave Gemini and Sagittarius and enter Scorpio and Taurus in a few months, or in a couple months rather. Okay. And this is also notable not only because it's a full moon lunar eclipse, which as I've described is a big deal, but it also makes a T-square with Jupiter. Jupiter's at 24 degrees Aquarius, and so it's only a few degrees away from making this T-square. So it just kind of adds to the intensity here. So Sun and Moon out of sign conjunction with the nodes means that we will experience more eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio for the next 2 years, because again, that's where the nodes are shifting. And don't get me wrong, because the sun's about to enter Sagittarius, and so the next eclipse for this season in just a couple weeks will actually be in Sagittarius. However, for the next 2 years, the eclipses will switch from being in Gemini and Sagittarius like they were for the last couple of years, and for the next 2 years they'll be in Scorpio and Taurus. So a lot of the arena for the sudden changes and for all the activity, for the last 2 years, it was in our mobility. Are we able to travel or not? The South Node was in Sagittarius, so we were inhibited from traveling far, or from religion or spirituality. These things were kind of shut down almost, and instead the area of Gemini was favored. So short distance travel, people close to you, your neighbors or friends, that's who you're seeing more, because you're not traveling outside as much, very far anyway. Also, technology is ruled by Gemini to some extent. So, that's where a lot of the focus was on that axis. For the next 2 years, it will be on Taurus and Scorpio. So a lot of these shifts for the next 2 years will be focused on our finances, especially with Uranus there. We're going to see some really interesting eclipses for the next 2 years once they start getting closer to Uranus. There'll be some really sudden shifts with our finances, with the economy, with any debts or loans. Also potentially with sexuality ruled by Scorpio. So that should be very interesting. But anyway, for this eclipse in particular will be visible over East Asia, the Pacific, as well as North and South America. Again, this is a partial lunar eclipse, so it's not going to be a full eclipse where the moon is completely blocked out by the Earth, but it will be partially blocked, and it will be seen in those areas. This eclipse may bring long-term changes to our resources and finances. It may also cause sudden changes to our personal relationships and long-term commitments. And I also see this as being a transition. I kind of covered this already, but a transition away from the conflicts regarding travel and mobility, which we've experienced over the last 2 years, going toward more issues pertaining to primarily finance, especially when we observe kind of the outer world. I think that's the biggest area. Taurus and Scorpio, more than any other axis, really rules our commodities, our investments, our debts, our loans. Not only like the cash in our wallet, which is ruled by Taurus, but also our investments and our loans, which is ruled by Scorpio. A lot of it is very financial, especially when we look at it on a societal level. Okay, and then also Jupiter in Aquarius adds to the intense activity and complexity here, indicating excesses in online activity that may be tied to this change to our commodities and what we value. Yeah, so I can almost see this as being an outlet, or it's also a factor. Online activity, technology, and these days almost everything is like tied to technology in some way, but this could trigger some kind of change with our finances and commitments. Even in our personal lives as well, a lot of it may be like online oriented, or with information that comes from online. I still think there could be information circulating with the sun only having had recently squared Jupiter, and then Mercury will too. So there could be information or provocative beliefs circulating online, which could end up changing things financially or economically. Also, personally changing our relationships in some way, our investments, our commitments. And I do want to say too that this can be especially jarring because Taurus and Scorpio are fixed signs. They're very stable relatively. Scorpio is almost like constant change, but it's still constant, and Taurus is very constant and stable. So this can be especially uncomfortable because these are areas of our lives that we expect to stay constant. We like our money and our finances to be constant and to be stable. We like our personal relationships and our commitments to be stable. The people that we've committed in, or the things we've committed ourselves to, and then vice versa, whatever or whomever has committed themselves to us. We like those to be stable and dependable. But with this eclipse happening, highlighting this axis, it won't be necessarily stable or dependable. There's going to be sudden changes in these areas. And I don't see this as a bad thing. I mean, whatever is changing on a karmic level is ready to go, and on some level. Like, we need change, we need evolution. And Scorpio, despite it being a fixed sign, it is geared toward change as well, geared toward evolution. So this change can be hard, but it's necessary for moving on to the next stage. And then at the end, so I just said use this transit to allow change and growth in the things you value and that you invest in. Also, make sure you are supporting yourself well and in a good place financially, because again, anyone who's not being financially responsible, which is, a lot of people or a lot of aspects of our society aren't, but this is not a good time to kind of dick around like financially, I would say. You really want to kind of cover all your bases here, or even just with anyone or anything that you depend on and invest in, not only financially, but, emotionally or with your time. Just make sure that you're investing in the right places, because things are changing now. The things we value or want to invest in, or the things that support us, may be changing dramatically very quickly. And so I think it's just important to kind of take stock in, maybe literally, like, do you have a good inventory in your house for certain things? But again, also just, reassessing these aspects of our lives and making sure that we are dependable in changing circumstances, and that the things or people that we have depended on are also, able to be depended on. Can you depend on yourself as well? This axis is very much having to do with self-sufficiency and also depending on other people. So again, there just could be very significant changes in these areas that we must adapt to. And lastly, I just said look to where Taurus and Scorpio are in your chart to see how it will affect you personally. I do offer readings still, so you can ask me for a reading if you'd like, or just ask me a question if you just have a simple question. That's fine. I'm more than happy to help. But yeah, I've described generally how this will affect all of us. But Taurus and Scorpio means something kind of unique for each person. So you can look in your own chart. What houses do those fall into? Because that's where this change will be. Also, Venus at 12 degrees of Capricorn does trine Uranus at 12 degrees of Taurus. Venus at 12 degrees Capricorn trines Uranus at 12 degrees Taurus. And this indicates potential for new positive changes in our finances, economy, and long-term goals. This is a really beautiful aspect as well. I mean, trines are very stable, very positive, at least in a kind of obvious way. They're the easiest aspect, for instance. So it's very energetically easy. So despite Uranus being sort of involved in this opposition with the Scorpio planets, which would indicate sudden change, unpredictability, Uranus is like the earthquake planet, so there could be literal earthquakes, but it could also just be like metaphorically like an earthquake, so sudden changes out of nowhere that just completely shift the environment. That would be indicated as well, but there is this almost silver lining with this trine to Venus, so maybe there is an ease or a grace when it comes to finances. Yeah, this is almost tricky. It's like sudden changes that can be really uncomfortable that require us to adapt, but Venus is there kind of supporting things, smoothing things over financially, because not only Taurus and Scorpio have much to do with our finances, but Capricorn does as well. Capricorn also has to do with like society or the government, the authoritarian structure, so oftentimes the government. So there could almost be, it's hard to imagine for me anything positive coming from the government, but something about the structure of society is positive right now, or it's supportive in maybe a very unpredictable or radical type of way. There's something about the system that's actually working, and I don't know what exactly that is. I'm almost hesitant to say that because with this opposition between Sun and Scorpio and then Moon and Taurus, Scorpio is very secretive and strategic, and Capricorn can be as well. So it's hard to say. I mean, it's almost like there's this part of our structure of society that's being very positive and that's being a stabilizing force. But at the same time, I think there could be manipulation happening, and it may be hard to see exactly what that stabilizing force is. Which forces are truly stabilizing and which are just posing as stabilizers and are actually secretly doing something else. Because, Scorpio is known, it's almost like an open secret that Scorpio kind of rules secrets. And what else? But at the same time, I mean, there's a lot happening when it comes to eclipses. There could be a lot of secret activity, but there can also be a lot of secret activity exposed as well, because the moon is completely lit up right now, so it can, bring light to areas that were covered before or darkened before. Okay, I think I've said enough about that. Going forward to Saturday, November 20th, moon does enter Gemini early in the day, depending on where you are. And it's almost interesting having an eclipse right at the end of a sign like that, but also right at the end of the day or beginning of the day. So it's almost like there's not only is there a very sudden shift from the eclipse itself, but also immediately after the eclipse, the moon goes into Gemini and the sun is almost in Sagittarius. So it's almost like a 1-2 punch type of thing. Like I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's almost like there's a really sudden change and then maybe like an echo of that change or a slightly quieter change immediately after, but both are very significant and impactful. So there is still lots of activity and frenetic energy as the effects of Friday's eclipse reverberate outward, but the mood becomes much more scattered and chatty. So it's almost like there's this big event that happens in Taurus and Scorpio, and then as the moon enters Gemini, it's almost like we're talking or we're extra communicative of those changes, perhaps. And then also Mercury at 24 degrees of Scorpio squares Jupiter at 24 degrees Aquarius. So you can see that exactly happening here now. And so this indicates increased activity and changes, especially regarding online, activity. I kind of brushed over this aspect before as well, that There could be leaking of secret or taboo or occult information. Or I don't know, just Mercury and Scorpio is very much focused on things that are secretive or controversial. And then Jupiter in Aquarius is focusing on society in the long term, and it's also focusing on kind of taboo or occult information, but it's, I would say, Mercury and Scorpio is more secretive, and Jupiter and Aquarius would be more revealing things. So there could be, I think there's a lot of both happening right now. I think this week there's a lot of stuff happening secretly, but I think there could also be a lot of secrets that are being figured out or leaked online, as I said. I think there's a lot of both. There's a lot of truth coming out, but there's a lot of lies as well. So it's going to be confusing. But this is really important, where we can make the most of these watery energies, these watery planets here, Sun, Mercury, and Mars, trining Neptune in Pisces. If you just allow yourself to kind of go be slower and be still, maybe have time alone, or just time where you can relax, you can figure things out, at least enough to give yourself a sense of peace in what would otherwise be a time of significant change and anxiety. Change does not have to be bad. It doesn't have to be anxious. You can evolve very quickly. And sometimes, like with this aspect, I really feel strongly this whole week, actually, that it's not about figuring everything out and getting out there and this isn't like Virgo that we're talking about, where you're like figuring everything out and like making a list and like doing everything, accomplishing everything. It's more subconscious. It's more about just like I think you don't really have to do anything in particular other than just like kind of relax and allow yourself to take it all in. I think we'll almost very much naturally adjust to these changes if we just let ourselves, if that makes sense. That might sound a little bit simplistic. I know it could be easier said than done, but that's really how I feel, that like we just have to kind of relax and just enjoy the show, like I said. Okay, and then also with Mercury and Scorpio squaring Jupiter and Aquarius, our mentality and our communication is pessimistic but also extremely perceptive at this time. And this really applies to this whole general time period this month with Mercury and Scorpio. But having that connection with Jupiter, we may be pessimistic and cynical, but we're also very much figuring things out very quickly. And this has to do with online activity, something coming from like the internet or technology. So yeah, I'll let you kind of figure that out or observe that as it happens. Let's go into Sunday, November 21st. The moon is still transiting Gemini, so we are curious, sociable, and scattered in our approaches today. Mercury at 24 degrees of Scorpio, sextiles Pluto at 24 degrees of Capricorn. And this marks a focus on our long-term goals and commitments. It's almost like we're figuring things out with Mercury making this aspect, and I think this is necessary for our soul growth and our long-term evolution and goals being accomplished, which is all marked by Pluto and Capricorn. And I really like that. I like that this full moon eclipse happening on Thursday or Friday is, we have trines and sextiles immediately before the aspect, and then we have this sextile immediately afterward. It's actually sort of forming a yod with the moon at the end of Gemini. There's a lot of bittersweet energy this week. Again, just with the nodes in general and with eclipses in general, it's almost like Wheel of Fortune energy, where you're just throwing everything up into the air and just letting the chips fall where they may. There's a lot of beauty happening right now and a lot of luck, dare I say, but there's also a lot of darkness and secrets. It's almost hard to even talk about because there's so much happening, really. But I do like that we have these sort of glimmers of easy aspects just before and just after this rather challenging or tumultuous eclipse that we're having, if that makes sense. So yeah, there is almost like a beauty, or we have this like things are just as easy as we need them to be. So this week you may feel like overwhelmed or very intense, but then right when you feel like it's going to be overwhelming, you get this like beautiful break, or there's this really nice thing that will just randomly happen to you. um and it'll be kind of intermittent like that this week. So just, I guess, just don't take it all too seriously, because it is just a big show in a way. Okay, what else? Oh yeah, so with this, Mercury making this sextile with Pluto, I think there is, it's almost like this is the treat we get at the end of this experience, where based on the things that we've learned, because I think this is a great week for figuring things out and becoming much more aware. And it's almost like Mercury makes this aspect with Pluto to sort of finalize that and to show that we have learned something, we've become stronger, maybe emotionally or mentally, and that this is crucial for something, for a long-term project, maybe a project that we're not even consciously aware of, but it's almost like on a soul level, something that we're meant to accomplish in this life. We've gotten closer to accomplishing, ideally, after this experience. I think this is marked by Mercury sextiling Pluto, us just becoming more aware, more stronger, more resilient. We're evolving faster. And then late in the day, the sun actually enters Sagittarius very late in the day. November 21st. There we go. Very, very late in the day. These aspects are making it hard for me because they're so close to midnight, a lot of these things. But anyway, so very late in the day, the sun finally enters Sagittarius. So happy birthday, Sagittarius. This is such a wild week. But yeah, so we do enter a month of having the sun in Sagittarius. And the sun actually hasn't even conjoined the south node yet. So we're like right in the midst of eclipse season. We're still going to have a new moon solar eclipse in Sagittarius on December 4th, I believe. And so this is really only the start. This is like the first wave of an intense energy or theme that we're experiencing. But yeah, this will go into the early November or early December as well. So yeah, it's only going to get more interesting, especially with the sun entering Sagittarius, which is a much more overtly energetic and active sign. So yeah, stay tuned. I'm sure I'll have an interesting video for you next week as well. But thanks for watching. I hope that helps, and have a great day.